What if I told you everything you've been taught about money is a lie? That your struggle, your debt, your endless work isn't a result of bad luck, poor choices, or lack of discipline, but something much darker. There is a ritual, a practice so ancient, so guarded, that only the world's wealthiest ever learn it. A silent code passed through generations, not found in textbooks or taught in universities, but whispered behind closed doors, in private rooms where power is bred. You see, while you wake up at 6 a.m., clock in and trade your hours for dollars, they don't. While you're taught to budget and save, they multiply wealth without lifting a finger. Because they don't operate in the same reality. They play a different game, one you were never invited to, and that's not an accident, it's by design. This system, the global economic machine you're trapped inside, was built to keep you blind, obedient, and broke. You've been programmed not to fail, but to serve. Serve a class of people who mastered not only money, but energy, intention, ritual. They understand the flow of wealth isn't random. It's spiritual, it's strategic. And the true billionaires, the ones behind banks, wars, and media empires, they all follow the same path. A ritual that magnetizes opportunity, influence, and unimaginable power. And you were never supposed to know it existed. You were taught that money equals effort, that hard work equals reward. But if that were true, wouldn't every construction worker, teacher, or nurse be a millionaire? No, because effort doesn't control wealth. Information does. Access does. Ritual does. You're not poor because you failed. You're poor because they designed it that way. This video is not just another theory. It's a revelation, a break in the signal, a crack in the wall. And if you're watching this right now, it means you're not like the others. Because only a few ever question the illusion. Only a few ever feel that invisible weight pressing on their chest, whispering, something isn't right. You've felt it, haven't you? The sense that the rich don't just make money, they attract it. That some invisible force is on their side. That no matter how hard you try, you're stuck in place. Now you'll find out why, but be warned. Once this truth enters your mind, there's no turning back. Because what you're about to hear has been buried, censored, and denied, not for your protection, but for theirs. So the question is, are you ready to see what they've been hiding? Because in the next moments, I'll reveal the first layer of the ritual, the key that opens a door to a world you were never meant to enter. Let's begin. But before I reveal what comes next, I need to ask you for something deeper, not just your attention, not just your curiosity, but your spirit. Because what we're uncovering here, it isn't just financial, it's spiritual warfare. And if you're watching this, it means something in your soul is already awakening. You've felt the system pressing you down. You felt like you were meant for more. So I want you to do something with me right now. Leave your name in the comments, not just to speak, but to be heard. Because tonight, we're going to pray over every single name that appears down there. Yes, we will pray for you, for your freedom, for your clarity, for your breakthrough. Because when truth comes to light, darkness pushes back, and you will need strength. You will need covering. You are not alone in this battle. This isn't just about algorithms and views. This is about souls waking up from economic hypnosis. So let your name be known. Let your cry be seen. Let heaven hear you. And if this message already stirred something inside you, if you feel that fire rising in your chest, click the like button. Not just for reach, but as a declaration. I see the truth, I choose to wake up. And subscribe to this channel, not just to follow, but to be equipped. Because what's coming next will shake your perception of money, power, and reality itself. You don't want to miss it. This is only the beginning. And now, let's pull back the curtain. Because in the next moment, I'll show you how the system was designed to keep you poor, broken, and blind. Are you ready? Let's go deeper. They've hidden this from you your entire life. Not because you're not smart enough to understand it. Not because it's too complex, but because if you knew, you'd no longer play your role in their game. You'd stop obeying the rules. You'd stop being predictable. You'd stop being profitable. Because the truth is, there is a ritual, a silent, calculated practice, not done with candles and robes, but with contracts, energy, influence, and time. You think money is about effort, about hours worked? That's what they made you believe. That's the illusion. That's the matrix. But in rooms you'll never enter, in networks you'll never be invited to, a different reality unfolds. One where wealth is summoned, not earned. One where opportunity isn't chased, it's created. The elite don't chase success. They attract it, and they do it using knowledge, dark knowledge, that's been passed down in silence. It starts young. Groomed in families that control banks, media, governments. Their children are not taught math. They are taught positioning. They are not taught to work. They are taught to command. While you were told to study, obey, and take on debt for a future they promised, but never intended to give you, they were being initiated into a system that runs parallel to yours, but never intersects. You saw school. They saw access. You saw hard work. They saw leverage. You saw survival. They saw domination. Because this isn't just an economic imbalance. This is spiritual warfare disguised as capitalism. The more you struggle, the more they grow. Your stress feeds their peace. Your scarcity sustains their abundance. And here's what hurts most. You never stood a chance because you weren't just underpaid, you were programmed from childhood, from the first time they told you money doesn't grow on trees, from the first time you saw your parents argue about bills, from every movie where the rich were villains and the poor were saints, from every paycheck that arrived just late enough to keep you anxious. You were taught poverty like it was morality, and anyone who escaped it was greedy or corrupt. But what if I told you that was part of the design? The elite created a code, a pattern, a ritual system that works beneath the surface of society. You don't see it because it's not supposed to be seen. They operate in shadows. They speak in signals. They build invisible empires with energy, intention, alignment. You feel it, don't you? That pressure in your chest, that feeling that something about this world isn't quite right, that you were meant for more, but something unseen keeps holding you down. That's not your imagination. That's the trap. You were never free. You were born into a contract, a spiritual and economic contract you never signed, but were bound to. They don't want you to question. They need you distracted, entertained, divided, busy enough to work, tired enough to obey, just awake enough to function but never to see. And while you're stuck in survival mode, trying to breathe through rising costs and falling hope, they're performing the ritual again. Every recession, every market crash, every global event, you think it's chaos, but to them, it's choreography, because chaos is how they reset the board. Every time people start waking up, they create noise. And while the world panics, they buy. While you bleed, they feast. While you retreat, they expand. They use energy, they use positioning, they use the code. And every time you doubt yourself, you give them more power. But now you're here. And that means something inside you broke the pattern. You're not supposed to be watching this. You're not supposed to question. You're not supposed to feel this fire rising in your chest. But you do, don't you? Because deep down, you know something is off. You've worked hard. You've been loyal. You've done everything right. So why are you still stuck? Because effort isn't the code. Obedience isn't the key. Knowledge is. Awareness is. Frequency is. They control everything. And unless you rewire your mind, unless you see the ritual for what it is, you will keep feeding their system while starving your soul. You were taught to fear money, but they worship it, not because they're greedy, but because they understand its energy. They treat it like a force, a living current. Not to be earned, but to be harnessed. This is the part they never wanted you to know, because once you learn how it really works, you become dangerous. You stop chasing, you start attracting, you stop surviving, you start commanding, you stop obeying, you start seeing the truth is finally out. And now that it is, they won't be able to silence it forever. Let them try, because in the next few moments, we're going to go deeper into this web, deeper than you've ever gone. Into the heart of the manipulated system. You'll see how the matrix was built, not to control your money, but to control you. And what comes next will change everything you thought you knew. Just listen closely. You were never meant to win. Let that sink in, because it's not a theory, it's not a metaphor. It's the blueprint. The system you were born into wasn't designed to reward you. It was built to control you, to use you, to drain your energy until there's nothing left but quiet obedience. You go to school, you're told to follow rules. Stand in line, raise your hand, memorize answers. Don't ask why. And from your earliest memories, you're conditioned, not to think, but to comply, not to challenge, but to accept. Then you grow up, you graduate, you enter the real world, only to realize it's just a deeper layer of the same trap. You work, you pay bills, you struggle, and somehow, no matter how hard you try, you're always one emergency away from collapse, one missed paycheck from panic, one medical bill from disaster. Why? Because the game was programmed that way. The system was never meant to elevate you. It was built to keep you spinning. endlessly, pointlessly, like a wheel in a cage you can't see. You were trained to chase comfort, not power, to consume, not create, to obey, not awaken. They call it freedom, but it's a carefully branded illusion, because real freedom doesn't exist in the world they've built. Not for people like you, not for people without access to the wealth code, the inner knowledge passed from hand to hand in circles of influence so secret they don't even have names, only symbols. While you're drowning in student debt, they're leveraging networks of privilege. While you're told to save for retirement, they're making millions on borrowed money they never intend to repay. While you're stuck in traffic, they're discussing legislation over lunch, laws they'll write, votes they'll buy, outcomes they've already planned. They don't play by the rules, because they wrote the rules, and they only apply to you. You think that by following the path, college, job, mortgage, you'll rise. But the path is a loop, not a ladder, and the higher you try to climb, the tighter the rope around your neck. They've designed every part of the system to extract from you. Your time, your energy, your hope. It's not just economic, it's spiritual control. They don't just want your money, they want your silence, they want your submission, and they've perfected the method. It's subtle, invisible, elegant. You never receive the tools to escape, only distractions to keep you numb. Entertainment, division, conflict, left versus right, race versus race, poor versus poorer. All illusions, all smokescreens, because while you're fighting each other over scraps, they're rewriting the map. The truth is, the matrix isn't technology, it's ideology. It's the belief that you are small, that you are powerless, that you are alone. But that belief was planted, cultivated, programmed, because a mind that questions is dangerous. That's why they never taught you about money. Not really. They taught you how to earn it, but not how to control it. They taught you how to spend it, but never how to multiply it. Because once you learn how wealth is actually created, you stop being a consumer. You start becoming a creator, and that threatens the entire order. The economic conspiracy isn't just real, it's ancient. It began the moment the elite realized they could use symbols to represent value and control to replace creation. From that moment forward, money became a weapon, not a tool, a system of hidden rules, a game with loaded dice, a ritual performed in broad daylight, invisible to the untrained eye. They call it capitalism, but it's ritualized dependence. You think you're competing, you're being contained. They don't need you to starve, they just need you to almost succeed, just enough to keep going, just enough to keep believing, but never enough to escape, because escape means awakening, and awakening spreads. The moment one person breaks the code, others begin to question, the spell begins to crack, and the elite fear that more than anything. That's why the same names repeat across generations, the same families, the same circles of power. Because they've secured the ritual, they protect it with secrecy, shame, and silence. They built a world where you're punished for asking why, where the truth is ridiculed, where false comfort is sold as success. But here's the fracture they didn't anticipate. The patterns are starting to show, people are seeing through the noise, and once you see the strings, you can't pretend they're not there, because the billionaires don't live in your reality, they live above it. Not because they're smarter, but because they were initiated into the code, trained in the mechanics of unseen power, raised inside a system you were never meant to touch. And still, you're here, still searching, still listening, still feeling that strange fire in your chest, the one that whispers, something's wrong, something's missing. You're not crazy. That discomfort is the edge of the illusion cracking. That restlessness is your soul remembering what it once knew. You were never meant to serve this system. You were never meant to kneel. But freedom doesn't begin with protest. It begins with perception, seeing through the veil, understanding the language of control, reading the signs not written in books, but etched into institutions, policies, and cultural myths designed to keep you docile. You see, control doesn't require chains anymore. All it takes is debt. All it takes is fear. All it takes is convincing you that this is the best you can do, that this life, and full of endless effort and empty hands, is the only life available to you. But it's not. You feel it, don't you? Like a shadow just out of view, like a door just waiting to be found. You know there's more, and you're right, because beyond the scripts they gave you, there's another story. One that's been buried, forbidden, suppressed. But it's still there, still alive, still waiting. And if you keep watching, you'll start to hear it more clearly. The ancient code echoing behind the curtain, pulling the strings of your reality, but you'll need to listen carefully, because what comes next was never meant to be revealed. There's a reason the same names hold power century after century, a reason fortunes don't just appear, they are summoned, controlled, pulled from thin air like magic, except it isn't magic. It's precision, it's structure, it's ritual. And you were never supposed to know it existed, because there is a hidden thread that connects ancient royalty to today's billionaires. A practice buried beneath language, cloaked in secrecy, performed not with superstition, but with absolute intention. What you call luck, they call design. What you see as success, they see as invocation. You think wealth is earned, but for them, wealth is attracted. It flows to those who know how to control energy, how to shift probability, how to bend economic laws in their favor without ever appearing to touch them. This isn't new. Long before banks, before the stock market, before the dollar even existed, there were kings, emperors, high priests, men who understood that money wasn't real, but power was. And whoever could control belief could control the flow of resources. That's where it began. The ritual, not a religious ritual, not a fantasy, a formula, a technology, passed from one bloodline to another, hidden in plain sight, guarded behind institutions and sealed with secrecy. Not because it's dangerous to perform, but because it's dangerous to know. They call it many things now. Wealth strategy, legacy planning, energetic alignment. But in its purest form, it's a precise system of spiritual manipulation, combined with ruthless action. The elite do not chase money. They program the world to deliver it to them. You've probably felt it before. That moment where everything in your life feels hard, heavy, stuck, while others seem to move effortlessly. They don't work harder than you. They don't suffer more. In fact, most of them don't even look like they're trying, because they aren't. They are performing the ritual, step by step, quietly, without drama, without spectacle. They build around symbols. They invest based on cycles. They speak through coded language and sign contracts not just with ink, but with intention. They understand how energy governs material form, how collective belief shapes financial reality. You were taught to budget. They were taught to bend frequency. And the greatest part of the trick? You helped them do it every time you doubted yourself, every time you believed that success was for other people, every time you saw someone with power and thought, they must be special. They must be chosen. They aren't chosen, they're trained. Because there is a code, a billionaire code, invisible to those outside the circle, obvious to those within. It's in the way they move, the way they dress, the names they give their companies, the locations they choose, the way they use language like a weapon, reframing loss as leverage, risk as privilege, domination as legacy. You were never given this code. You were told to be humble, to work hard, to be grateful for scraps, to believe that one day maybe it'll be your turn. But turns were never part of the plan, only hierarchy. And at the top of that structure sits not just money, but access to ritualized power, a practice rooted in ancient systems of rule, passed through bloodlines, encoded in the foundations of temples, banks, governments. They don't just understand markets, they engineer emotion. They move masses with headlines, with fear, with scarcity. And while you react, they act. While you wait, they position. While you pray, they perform. This is not a game of intelligence, it's a game of structure. And the structure was never built to serve you. You're not inside it. You are beneath it. Unless you wake up, unless you begin to see the signs, the patterns, the ritual movements of wealth behind the curtain of chaos. What you think is randomness is ritual. What you believe is unpredictable is scripted. What you call the market is their stage. And you've been paying for your ticket with time, hope, and silence. But here's the crack: they've become arrogant, lazy. They believe no one is watching. They think no one will ever trace the threads. But you're here, and you're listening, and maybe you're starting to realize this can't stay hidden forever, because they don't just earn money, they invoke it, through movement, through vibration, through mental clarity, through disciplined will. Their wealth doesn't just appear, it is summoned, fed, channeled, and unless you learn how it works, you will spend your life feeding a system designed to keep you asleep. But make no mistake, this isn't about buying stocks or real estate. This isn't about side hustles or smart investments. This is about perception, awareness, breaking the veil, understanding that the world you've been taught to accept is a manufactured illusion, kept alive by your compliance. That's the part that hurts the most, isn't it? realizing you were never in control, that every win you thought you achieved was just a managed concession, part of a larger dance, calculated to give you hope, just enough to keep you moving, but never enough to set you free, because they know something most don't. They understand that wealth is not about effort, it's about alignment, and alignment requires silence, clarity, and power, not noise, not panic, not hustle. And so they perform the ritual, daily, quietly, with relentless precision. They cultivate space. They manage thought. They plant ideas in the minds of millions through stories, culture, and false heroes, while they sit behind closed doors, mapping outcomes 5, 10, 20 years in advance. That's not strategy. That's ritualized foresight. The same foresight ancient kings used to build empires without lifting swords. You still think this is about money. This is about control, about energy, about an elite few who understand that wealth is spiritual first, material second, that if you master vibration, the form will follow. And once you see that, once you recognize the language, once you hear the silence between their words, you can't go back. Because now you're not just aware, you're watching the moves, you're reading the signs, you're tracing the patterns, and soon you'll begin to see the entire ritual unfold right in front of your eyes. But before we go deeper, you need to understand something far more unsettling. The ritual is only half the truth. The other half is what they use it to protect. They walk among us like ordinary men. You see them on stages, magazine covers, stock tickers, headlines, smiling, calculated, unshaken. But behind those curated smiles, behind the philanthropic narratives, awards, and polished suits, lies something much colder, much more precise, a map, a ritual, an invisible mechanism so ancient, so intact, it doesn't rely on technology or chance to function. It relies on energy. You've heard the names: Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Jay-Z, different backgrounds, different industries, but they all follow the same silent script. Because behind every billion-dollar empire isn't just innovation, it's initiation. They were introduced to something you weren't. Not a course, not a program, a pattern, a code, one that starts not with money, but with control of self. Because the first thing the elite master is not wealth, but stillness. They understand that clarity is a weapon. Noise is the enemy, and while the world scrolls and panics and reacts, they step back, they observe, they align. These people don't just wake up and hope to win the day. They build their environment to reflect their intention. From the first light that hits their eyes to the architecture of the room they sit in, every detail is deliberate. Look at Buffett, a man whose simplicity is deceptive. He's not just conservative with capital, he's obsessed with rhythm, repetition, and silence. He reads for 6 hours a day, not because he loves knowledge, but because he understands how information flows beneath perception. He doesn't chase, he positions, he waits, he watches, because patience is part of the ritual. The masses crave speed, the elite move in cycles. Now look at Musk. To the world he's eccentric, erratic, but what he's actually doing is expanding bandwidth, controlling narrative, projecting timelines into the future, and collapsing public belief around his vision. Every tweet, every delay, every pivot, part of a much larger manipulation of perception. This isn't about cars or rockets. This is about frequency. Musk doesn't build machines, he builds myths, and myths bend markets. Jay-Z, a man who turned rhythm into real estate, music into margin, street into stock. He moved from cultural currency to capital leverage, not because he followed a financial advisor, but because he understood the ritual of identity control. He reinvented himself without ever asking permission. That's part of the game, reconstruction. The elite don't conform, they curate. And the moment the world adapts, they shift again. And while the masses worship talent, the elite worship space, the room, the table, the network. It's not who you know, it's how you move around who you know. They sit at tables you've never seen, discuss deals before the companies even exist, make decisions that shape industries, while the public argues about headlines written days before by people who weren't even in the room. And you wonder how they do it. They don't think like the rest. They don't live in reaction. They build in reverse. They start with outcome. Then they build the illusion of chance around it. This is the unseen game. The real billionaires don't wait for opportunities. They manufacture gravity. They don't pitch ideas. They become too valuable to ignore. You think it's about effort. They know it's about energetic positioning. You work 8 hours to earn money. They use silence to attract it. You fill your time with meetings, tasks, movement. They preserve time to increase voltage, because wealth doesn't flow where there's noise. It flows where there's magnetism. That's why they retreat, not because they're tired, but because they're building resonance. This isn't productivity, it's alchemy, modern sorcery, without candles, without chance. Just structure, presence, and perception. And it goes deeper. The real power is in what they don't say. The meetings that never make it to email, the names that never appear on the document, the symbols in their logos, the geometry in their architecture, the direction their buildings face. It's not random, it's ritual. They don't drink from the same water. They don't walk through the same doors, because what surrounds them must feed them energetically. That's why their homes are sanctuaries, not shelters. Why their offices are temples, not cubicles. Why they walk into rooms and immediately become the axis. You think it's charisma? It's geometry, design, conscious dominion over their field. And here's what stings the most. It was never hidden, not really. You were trained to ignore it, to laugh it off as conspiracy, to dismiss it as coincidence, to call it hustle or luck or talent. But it's not any of those things. It's the wealth code in action, a system of mental sovereignty, emotional regulation, spatial mastery, and energetic expansion. They don't wait to be chosen. They activate the field. They choose themselves, then move until the world catches up. And you've been conditioned to ask for permission, to wait for the green light, to pray for the opportunity that will never come, because you were programmed to perform, not to position, to react, not to originate, to survive, not to summon. But now something's cracking. You feel it, don't you? The stillness behind their power, the strange order behind their chaos, the feeling that nothing they do is accidental, because it's not. None of it is. And now you're seeing it, the way they move, the words they use, the things they never say. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, because this isn't about money anymore. It never was. It's about access to a hidden language, a pattern that governs who rises, who owns, who decides. A language you were never taught to hear until now. But if you're starting to listen closely, if you're beginning to feel the code beneath the surface, then it's time to show you what they fear the most. The one thing they've buried deeper than the ritual itself. The reason it exists in the first place. They didn't need chains to keep you trapped. They used something far more effective, your own beliefs. From the moment you were born, you were placed into a system so intricate, so well designed, that you mistook it for reality. You were taught to obey before you even learned to speak, to sit still, to raise your hand for permission, to wait for your turn. You were praised for silence, rewarded for following, punished for questioning, and somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing the bars. You were taught to believe that money is dangerous, that wanting more makes you greedy. That ambition is arrogance. That power corrupts. You were handed a script that glorifies struggle and demonizes success, unless it's happening to someone you'll never meet. You were told, be grateful, stay humble, don't aim too high. And while you memorized those lines, the elite memorized rituals, because they don't follow that script. They wrote a different one where wealth is not earned, it's assumed, where control is not requested, it's inherited, where fear is not something to overcome, it's something to install in others. They didn't need to hide the truth, they just had to teach you to reject it. Look around, the majority worship survival. They celebrate just getting by. They post about grinding, hustling, sacrificing, as if pain is proof of virtue, as if the more you suffer, the more you deserve something better. But that's the trap. You were taught to find honor in struggle, while they were trained to find leverage in silence. You wake up every morning carrying invisible weight. Doubt, fear, guilt. That voice in your head that says, you're not enough. That whisper that tells you to play small, to keep your head down, to not rock the boat. That voice is not yours. It was given to you, it was programmed. You were programmed to be poor and you don't even know it. They planted that virus in your mind, in your schools, in your parents, in your culture, in your gods. And every time you questioned it, someone made you feel ashamed. Every time you dreamed bigger, someone reminded you of your place. Every time you imagined freedom, someone handed you another bill, another rule, another reason to stay where you are. Because freedom isn't profitable, not for them. You in motion? Dangerous. You inspired, a threat. You awake, unstoppable. So they built a world where the walls are invisible, where the locks are psychological. where the guards are your own thoughts. This is not an accident, this is architecture, this is a manipulated system. They don't need to break you physically, they just need to convince you that wealth is for someone else, that power is not for people like you, that freedom is an illusion, that the matrix is real, and that you are just a piece on their board. And once you believe that, you'll never leave. You'll stay inside the lines. You'll never ask, why is the game rigged? Because you'll be too busy blaming yourself for not winning. And while you spiral into shame, they sit quietly, harvesting the energy of your labor, feeding on your confusion, expanding their economic power, while you collapse into another sleepless night wondering what you did wrong. You did nothing wrong. You just weren't told the truth. You weren't told that the system wasn't designed for you to win. You weren't told that your self-doubt is a feature, not a flaw. You weren't told that your guilt is engineered. You weren't told that your fear is useful to them. Because the moment you stop feeling guilty for wanting more, the moment you stop asking for permission to be powerful, the moment you recognize that the thoughts in your head were planted, not born, you start to rise. And they don't want that. They want you tame, predictable, contained. But now you're here, and something is shifting. Maybe you felt it. That discomfort in your chest when you realize your dreams have been filtered through someone else's limitations. That flicker of rage when you see the lies written in school books and sermons. That pulse of rebellion when you recognize that none of this is natural. It was constructed. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. Once the veil lifts, you start to see the code. You notice how media frames wealth, how poverty is glorified, how success is mocked, how leaders who tell the truth are silenced, and those who distract are crowned. You notice how spiritual control is disguised as morality, how guilt is weaponized, how freedom is always just out of reach, just one promotion, one sacrifice, one compromise away, and yet it never comes. Because the game was never about freedom, it was about obedience. And the obedient don't question, they accept, they adapt, they survive. But you weren't born to survive, you were born to awaken, to rip through the illusion, to see the machine for what it is, to reclaim what was stolen from you long before you could speak, because somewhere beneath the layers of programming, the rituals of silence, the years of small thinking, and the invisible chains, you remember what it felt like to believe in possibility, to imagine a life without fear, to feel your own power before they told you to be afraid of it. That memory, that flicker of light they tried to extinguish, that's the doorway. And once you step through it, you'll see that none of this was ever about money. Not really. It was about power, control, and most dangerously, truth. And the closer you get to it, the more they will try to pull you back. Not because they hate you, but because they need you asleep. Because you awake is the one thing the system can't contain. So ask yourself now, what if everything you believed about money, about success, about yourself, was given to you for a reason? And what if that reason was to keep you from ever discovering what you're truly capable of? They control everything, but not forever, because now you see the glitch, the crack in the code, and what waits on the other side is something they fear more than anything, and it starts with what comes next. They told you the door didn't exist, that what you were looking for wasn't real, that all you could ever do was cope, adapt, survive, that wanting more was dangerous, that questioning too much would lead to your downfall, and so you stopped looking, you silenced the voice, you settled into the noise, you accepted the script, but the truth is there is a door, a portal hidden in plain sight, not guarded by guns, but by belief, not locked with keys, but with fear. And the moment you start asking the right questions, the moment you feel something cracking inside you, that door begins to glow, just faintly, just enough to remind you that freedom is not a fantasy, but a threat to the manipulated reality they built to contain you. They've programmed you to think awakening comes later, after more work, more pain, more sacrifice, that you're not ready, that you're too late, that you're too small. But awakening doesn't wait. It begins the moment you decide it must. Because all of this, every trap, every chain, every illusion, was designed to be undone by a single act of defiance, a decision. The decision to stop playing their game, the decision to question the rules, the decision to look directly at the system and say, I see you now. That's the beginning of reprogramming. That's the first fracture in the matrix. The billionaire agenda doesn't start with money. It starts with identity. They teach their own to believe differently, to see differently, to move through the world with a sense of entitlement, not rooted in arrogance but in awareness. Awareness that the system is artificial and therefore it can be bent. You've been taught to move with hesitation, to second guess, to ask for permission, but the ones who rise, they give themselves permission. They create energy through decisive movement. They don't wait for the right moment. They claim it. And the first step to entering their world is choosing to exit yours. Not physically, not geographically, but energetically. It means removing your loyalty from a system that never loved you. It means breaking the emotional contract that ties your worth to struggle. It means seeing guilt for what it really is, an ancient mechanism of spiritual control. You weren't born ashamed, you were taught to be. And as long as you carry that shame, you will never cross the threshold. But what if, for just one moment, you put it down? What if you let go of the story that says, this is just how life is? The story that says, people like me don't get that far. The story that says, they're special, I'm not. That story is the spell, the invisible ritual they cast over the masses, and the moment you stop repeating it, the spell breaks. This isn't motivational fluff, this is war. A quiet, systematic spiritual warfare designed to keep you compliant, exhausted, tamed. But within that war, there is a code, and those who find it shift realities. This is the part they never teach, not in schools, not in media, because if too many people found the door, the system would collapse. The structure that feeds on your stagnation would dissolve, so they bury the path, and they sell you copies of the map with the X missing. But now you've seen the real one. And the first step, the only step you must take right now, make the decision not to hustle, not to grind, but to see differently, to stop blaming yourself, to stop accepting their definitions, to stop wearing chains you've outgrown. Because the longer you wait, the deeper the roots grow, and the more familiar the cage becomes, the harder it is to even notice the door. But it's there. It always has been. And if you pause for just a moment, if you breathe through the noise, past the fear, beneath the guilt, you'll hear it humming beneath the surface, like a signal, a frequency, calling you back to who you were before they told you who to be. You're not late. You're not broken. You're not too far gone. You're standing at the threshold, and all that's left is a choice, because the path they sold you leads in circles, but the one they've hidden, that one breaks cycles. And once you take that first step, the terrain begins to change. Your perception starts to distort. The false comfort of the known world becomes unbearable, and you'll feel like something inside you is breaking. But it's not. It's something waking up. And once it does, once it fully awakens, there's no turning back, because what you're about to see next will change everything. And once it wakes up, once that part of you begins to see without filters, everything starts to fracture. The conversations you once tolerated now feel empty. The goals you once chased now seem artificial. The pain you carried no longer feels like yours, because it never was. It was assigned to you, carefully, silently, consistently, through media, school, tradition, fear. You didn't become small by accident. You were made small, programmed to stay in cycles, programmed to crave comfort over clarity, programmed to ask for answers instead of asking deeper questions. Now that the veil has lifted, you can feel it, can't you? This isn't just about wealth anymore, it never was. This is about power, ownership, legacy, and now you know. There is a hidden code, a spiritual firewall designed to keep you poor, not just in bank accounts, but in vision, in identity, in truth. Because the greatest lie they've ever told is that the elite simply worked harder. But now you've seen too much. You've glimpsed the ritual. You've heard the hum of the matrix. You've felt the silent war being waged not on your body, but on your belief. You've woken up in the middle of the program. And the question is, what will you do with it? Because now, the real game begins. It's not just about uncovering what was hidden. It's about rewriting what was written into you. Because if there is a ritual for attracting wealth, there is also a ritual for staying poor, and it's far more widespread. Look around. Every screen, every system, every conversation echoes the same frequency. Be small, be afraid, be realistic, be like everyone else. They masked it with good intentions. They called it tradition. They called it safety. They told you it was just the way things are. But it's not. It's spiritual control. It's financial slavery dressed as normal life. And now that you know it, the choice becomes unavoidable. You can no longer pretend. You can't go back to sleep. Because the system will feel different now. You'll begin to see the symbols. You'll notice the unseen power moving behind decisions that were once invisible. It's not paranoia. It's recognition. You are not crazy. You were conditioned. Conditioned to believe your limits were truth. Conditioned to believe obedience was intelligence. Conditioned to believe struggle was noble. But it was never about nobility. It was about keeping you too tired to question. So let me tell you something most will never dare say out loud. You were programmed to be poor. Not because you're weak, not because you're lazy, but because the billionaire agenda requires your obedience. It requires you to be predictable, manageable, small. They built a manipulated system where your attention is currency, your time is collateral, and your soul is collateral damage. But you've stepped out of line now. You've heard what wasn't meant to be spoken. You've started to see the wealth code beneath the noise. And soon you'll feel it pulling at you, an ancient part of you that knows this is not your final form, that knows you were never meant to survive. You were meant to build. But the system doesn't teach you how to build. It teaches you how to obey. And what's coming next on that will expose how they installed that programming into your mind, line by line, belief by belief. This next part will be the most dangerous yet. Not because it reveals more darkness, but because it hands you the light. It will show you how to reprogram your financial identity from the inside out. How to dismantle the chains they wrapped around your name, your family, your future. How to finally escape the invisible trap you were born into. You won't need more effort. You'll need alignment. You won't need more sacrifice. You'll need clarity. And it starts with a new language, a new awareness, a new command of who you are. Because the elite never feared your ambition. They feared your awareness, and now you've stepped onto the path they tried to erase. So pause here. Let it sink in. You're not just watching a video. You're stepping across a threshold. And when you do, the program begins to collapse. The illusion starts to burn, and behind it waits your original blueprint. Unbroken, unchained, untamed. They don't want you to find it. They need you tired, quiet, afraid. Because if too many people wake up, if too many start breaking the invisible code, the entire game ends. And that's why this is just the beginning. Because in the next video, I'm going to show you exactly how they installed the poverty program inside your subconscious. I'll reveal the rituals, institutions, and systems they used to make you think this life is all you'll ever have. And then I'll show you how to delete it, line by line, belief by belief, until you're no longer reacting to the system. You're rewriting it. You don't want to miss this. What comes next will change everything. And if you've made it this far, then you're ready for more. Drop a comment below if you're feeling it. If something clicked, if something cracked inside you, tell me what it was. Write, "Now it makes sense." Or say, "They control everything." Or simply, "I'm done playing their game." This isn't just engagement. This is resonance. This is how we begin to break the code together. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you wake up, you can't be controlled. Get ready. The next step is where everything unlocks. If something deep inside you stirred while watching this, if at any moment you felt like a voice beyond this world was speaking directly to you, if it felt like God was trying to wake you up through every word, every truth, every revelation in this video, then this is not just content. This is a calling, and if you heard that calling, don't ignore it. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel isn't just about information, it's about transformation. You weren't guided here by accident. You're here because you're being prepared for something greater. If you made it all the way to the end, type this in the comments so I know you're one of the few who's truly awake. I heard the call. I won't go back to sleep. That one phrase tells me you're part of the few who are no longer just watching. You're rising. And if this message shook you, if you felt it in your bones, if it broke something open in you, leave a like. Not for the algorithm, but because it's your silent yes. Your yes to breaking the code. Your yes to freedom. Your yes to the truth. Now don't stop here. The next video is already waiting for you. Click it. Watch it. Let it take you deeper. Because once you start this journey, you owe it to yourself to see how far the truth really goes.